have one when you can have five? Why have five? You can have nine. I give away a you can have mine. I need a break from a like it's halftime. Blah, 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 blah. Get out my ear. Always talking about shit I ain't trying to hear. I had to...
At some point in the early hours of September 22nd, 2023, a white van with New Jersey license plates pulled out of the parking lot of a bar on the East Freeway in Houston, Texas. It had been sitting there for close to an hour with its lights off. Nobody who saw it thought much about it at the time. Vans park outside bars. That is not unusual. What was inside that van was quite unusual. And what happened after it drove away from that parking lot is something that DeAndrea Ford's family, her grandmother, her uncle, and her 4-year-old son would spend the next year desperately trying to get answers about. DeAndrea Ford was 22 years old. She was a mother and a hard worker who had taken a job at Diva's Bikini Bar and Sports Lounge a few weeks earlier to keep money coming in. She was also something else. Something that very few people outside of law enforcement knew about at the time she disappeared. She was a witness in an active capital murder case with a court date coming up fast. She never came home. Her family reported her missing 3 days later. And when police finally found the van, parked in Dallas, what they found inside it made the driver impossible to ignore. He said he had nothing to do with her disappearance, but the evidence said otherwise. This is the story of DeAndrea Ford, a young mother who survived a murder, became the one person who could testify about what she had seen, and then vanished before she ever got the chance. What really happened inside that van on the East Freeway? What was DeAndrea's connection to a capital murder case that had nothing to do with the man who killed her? And why did it take so long for the people with the power to act to finally do something? DeAndrea LaKelsia Ford was born on October 24, 2001 in Houston, Texas. She grew up in the kind of household that requires children to become adults before they are ready, raised primarily by her grandmother, Bridget Carrier, and her uncle, Kevin Carrier. Her grandmother was the anchor of her world, the person she called when things went wrong, the person who kept the lights on and the routine intact when everything else was uncertain. DeAndrea was described by her loved ones as someone who took her responsibilities seriously from a young age. She was punctual, she was respectful, she showed up for the people who counted on her, and she expected the same in return. When she became pregnant at 16, she did not run from it. She leaned into motherhood the way she leaned into everything else in her life, with the understanding that it was now the most important thing she had to get right. Her son was 4 years old at the time she disappeared. He was the reason she worked multiple jobs, the reason she did not complain about exhaustion, and the reason she had started picking up shifts at Diva's Bikini Bar and Sports Lounge on the East Freeway in Houston just a few weeks before that September night. The work was not glamorous. None of the work she did was glamorous, but it paid, and paying was what mattered when you had a child depending on you and a grandmother who had already given everything she had to raise you. DeAndrea was also navigating something beyond financial pressure. She was supplementing her income through paid sexual encounters, a reality that her family was aware of and that would later become central to how investigators and the public understood what happened to her. It is worth stating plainly what that reality means in the context of this case. It did not make her less worthy of protection. It did not make her disappearance less urgent. And it did not make the delays in the response to her case acceptable. It simply tells you something about the impossible math that a lot of young mothers in her position are quietly solving every single day. Houston knew DeAndrea Ford as a girl who grew up too fast, worked too hard, and loved her son with a determination to give him something better than what they started with. What Houston did not yet know was that in the months before she disappeared, DeAndrea's life had become tangled up in something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with the white van, but that may have put her directly in its path. On the night of May 18, 2023, 4 months before DeAndrea vanished, a man named Otis Parker Jr. was shot and killed during an attempted robbery in Houston. DeAndrea Ford was in the vehicle when it happened. She survived. Otis Parker Jr. did not. Parker had been a manager involved in coordinating paid sexual services, including arrangements that involved DeAndrea. The night of his murder was not supposed to end the way it did, but it ended with a man dead, 4 people arrested and charged with capital murder and aggravated assault, and DeAndrea Ford as a living witness to all of it. The 4 individuals charged were Jarrell Tavon Wheeler, Jamal Ray Brown, Quanah Renee Taylor, and Mariah Corinthian Green. All of them were in custody. All of them were facing capital murder charges, and the case against them relied in a meaningful part on what DeAndrea had seen from inside that vehicle on the night Otis Parker was killed. She had cooperated with investigators. She had given her account, and she was aware that the case was moving toward trial, which meant that her testimony was moving toward a courtroom. In the criminal justice system, that makes you something specific. It makes you a witness. And being a witness in an active capital murder case in a city like Houston is not an abstract legal designation. It is a vulnerability. It is information that the wrong people can act on. DeAndrea Ford disappeared on September 22, 2023. What made it more disturbing was that her court appearance in the Parker murder case was coming up within days. Whether those 2 facts are directly connected in terms of motive has never been conclusively established in court. Yolande J. Washington, the man charged with her murder, had no known connection to the Parker murder suspects who were already behind bars. But the timing of her disappearance, days before she was due to testify in a capital murder case, is the kind of detail that investigative reporters and DeAndrea's family have never been able to simply set aside. And it's the kind of detail that raises questions this case has not yet fully answered. DeAndrea LaKelsea Ford was last seen on surveillance footage captured at Diva's Bikini Bar and Sports Lounge at 11,927 East Freeway in Houston in the early hours of September 22, 2023, sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning after her shift had ended. The footage showed her walking out of the bar and getting into a white GMC Savannah cargo van. The van had New Jersey license plates. It was parked in the lot with its lights off. DeAndrea got in willingly. The van sat there for approximately an hour before it drove away. That hour is significant. An hour is a long time. It is long enough for a negotiation or a conversation or something that started as one thing and became something else entirely. Whatever happened inside that van during those 60 minutes is information that only one person has ever been in a position to provide, and that person has told investigators a version of events that the evidence does not support. The driver of that van was Yolande Washington, 51-year-old, a truck driver out of state, and a man with a documented history of violence specifically targeting women in the sex industry. He was not a stranger to the kind of transaction that DeAndrea was known to engage in. He was precisely the kind of man who would know how to approach her, and he was precisely the kind of man who made him dangerous in ways she may not have had enough information to see coming. When DeAndrea did not come home that night, no one knew yet that anything had gone wrong. She worked late. She kept her on schedule. It took 3 days before her family, worried by the silence, filed a missing persons report.
A Houston woman who, according to court documents, is a key witness in a capital murder case has been missing for more than a week. Now, both family members and officials are searching for answers. 21-year-old DeAndrea Ford, a dancer at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill, was last seen getting into a van outside of the bar on the East Freeway. She was a witness in a May shooting that left one man dead. Police say 4 people were arrested in that case, including a former Harris County detention officer.
Bridget Carrier, DeAndrea's grandmother, had raised her from childhood. She knew her granddaughter's patterns, her communication habits, and the rhythm of her days. When the calls stopped being answered and the days kept passing without word, Bridget knew that this was not DeAndrea being unreachable. This was something else. The family reported her missing on September 25th, 2023.
Tonight, new details on the missing Houston woman who was last seen getting into a van outside of the Bikini Bar where she worked as a dancer. Court documents now show that DeAndrea Ford, she was a key witness in a capital murder case. Fox 26's Sherman DeSalle joining us live now from the newsroom to break this case down for us. Sherman.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. As tonight, police have no new details on DeAndrea's whereabouts, but our newsroom has managed to find out that the 21-year-old was a witness in a shooting in May that left one man dead. 4 people were arrested in this case, including a former Harris County detention officer. Court documents state that on May 10th, DeAndrea Ford and 21-year-old Kitiana Taylor traveled to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to work as dancers and prostitutes for clients brought to them by 35-year-old Otis Parker. Parker was driving Taylor and Ford home from Louisiana with the cash the women made there, according to documents. Police say text messages from Taylor indicate she was planning a setup to rob Parker of at least $1,500 in cash when they arrived at an apartment complex on Selinsky Road early that morning. Parker was shot and killed. 22-year-old Jamal Brown, also known as Bam, was listed as the shooter, and 22-year-old Jarrell Wheeler was listed as an accomplice, along with Kitiana Taylor and 20-year-old Mariah Green. Jamal Brown was killed a month later in a shootout with police. He had been on the run from the capital murder charge. The 3 other suspects, including Jarrell Wheeler, a former Harris County detention officer, remains in jail. Now, whether or not this shooting in May is related to DeAndrea Ford's disappearance, that's yet to be confirmed. I reached out to Ford's grandmother, who I spoke to yesterday, to get a comment, but I haven't heard back as of right now.
What followed was a period that Bridget and her son Kevin would later speak about publicly, with a grief that had turned into frustration, criticism, and a clear-eyed recognition that their family's urgency was not being matched by the people who had the authority to act on it.
Week tonight, police and family members continue the search for DeAndrea Ford, whom you see here. Investigators say that she was last seen at Diva's Bikini Bar and Grill, where she works in East Houston. KPRC2's Candace Burns spoke to her family this evening, and she joins us live now from HPD headquarters. Candace.
Keith, 21-year-old DeAndrea Ford has been missing for 5 days. Her family has tried everything that they can think of to find her, and tonight they believe she's in danger.
I feel like something's wrong.
Bridget Carrier, grandmother of DeAndrea Ford, says it's unlike her granddaughter to disappear for days.
It's too many days.
DeAndrea is the mother of a 4-year-old boy.
She'll call every day and talk to him if she's not here.
Investigators say she's 5'4" and weighs about 170 pounds. She was last seen last Thursday, September 21st, in a black tank top and tan pants, leaving the establishment where her family says she had been working for about 2 weeks.
To our knowledge, no one had spoken with her, so we all began a tedious process of trying to get in contact with her. No one had any success. Her phone was going directly to voicemail.
Her uncle, Kevin Carrier, says there is video of his niece leaving the club.
We were able to retrieve surveillance video of her leaving in a white van with someone. The individual we don't know.
He says the video is considered sensitive to the investigation and police are following leads from it to find DeAndrea.
If someone is holding her against her will, please know that law enforcement is on the trail.
The family is extremely worried.
I have a gut feeling is that something is not right.
They want DeAndrea back with them safe.
I'm praying and I'm hoping that they bring her home.
Now, all too often, we hear from families whose loved ones are missing, and we spend a part of our mornings talking about what's being done to find that person and the latest in the search and recovery efforts. In the past few weeks, the case of DeAndrea Ford has been discussed a lot right here in our newsroom. KPRC2 reporter Rochelle Turner has been following that story. Rochelle, so this is something that we discuss in our editorial meetings. We discuss how we're going to report on these things, but you're here to give more details on maybe why this case isn't getting all of the attention that you think it should.
Yes, and I'm so happy to be here on The Plus with you, Haley.
Thank you, yeah.
So yes, DeAndrea Ford has been missing since September 21st, and her family is very upset and aggravated and angry about how her story is being told in the media.
The missing women of color in America disappear into a gap in the system that has been documented and criticized for decades. Cases are deprioritized, investigations move slowly. Families find themselves doing the work of detectives because no one else is doing it fast enough. The Black and Missing Foundation, an organization that specifically advocates for missing Black women and girls, eventually took up DeAndrea's case and helped amplify it at a time when the coverage and the urgency were both falling far short of what her family believes the situation demanded. It was not until November of 2023, 2 full months after DeAndrea had disappeared, that police located the white GMC Savannah van. It had been sitting in Dallas. When investigators processed the vehicle, what they found was enough to make Lled J. Washington impossible to dismiss. There was DNA evidence inside. Specifically, DeAndrea's blood was mixed with Washington's DNA on clothing recovered from the van. There were cell phones. There were personal items. The van was not a dead end. It was an answer. Despite what the evidence in that vehicle was telling them, Washington was initially detained in Dallas on unrelated charges and then released without being charged in connection with DeAndrea's case. That decision, to let him walk out while DeAndrea's family was still waiting to know where their daughter was, became the moment that the family's grief transformed fully into outrage. On January 11, 2024, more than 3 months after DeAndrea was last seen getting into that white van, Lled J. Washington was finally arrested and charged with her murder.
Tonight, new details in the alleged murder of a Houston mom. Police say they are charging 51-year-old Lled Washington in the death of DeAndrea Ford. The 21-year-old was last seen alive at her job at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar, where family believes she was kidnapped. Troy Kless joins us live after going through several pages of court documents, and we do want to warn our viewers the details are disturbing. Troy.
Yeah, Marcelino. Well, I spoke with Ford's uncle on the phone earlier today. He says that the family is really distraught right now. Meanwhile, the suspect in this case is waiting to be extradited back to Houston.
On September 22nd at Divas in East Houston is where DeAndrea Ford was last seen. Documents say she met Yolande Washington there, and surveillance cameras show the two going into a van together around 1:23 a.m. Washington allegedly told detectives that he paid Ford. Charging documents say surveillance video showing Ford getting into the back of the van is the last time she's seen alive. Over an hour later, Washington gets into the front seat and drives away. When we spoke to Ford's family in September, they were worried.
I'm confident that something's not right. This is not her normal behavior.
Ford's phone was found the same morning, but Washington and his van were found in Virginia days later. Ford was not in the van, but deputies found blood in multiple areas of the vehicle. According to these court records, DNA consistent with the victim was found mixed with the defendant's DNA in bloodstains found on a shirt the suspect was wearing the night of Ford's disappearance. Documents describe searches at several locations in Houston, but Ford's body has not yet been found. On October 25th, Washington was arrested at his home in New Jersey.
And Marcelino, like you said, these 5 pages of court documents here have so many more gruesome details about this case. Now, as for where the suspect is tonight, he is currently being held in the Dallas County Jail on an unrelated charge of sexual assault.
He was held in Dallas County Jail on a bond of $1,100,000. At the time of his arrest, no body had been recovered. Prosecutors were pursuing what is known in legal terms as a no-body homicide, a murder case built on forensic evidence, surveillance footage, cell tower data, and witness statements, rather than the physical discovery of human remains. Then, on March 15, 2024, human remains were found in a culvert on Luna Road in Dallas County. They were skeletal. They had been there long enough that identifying them would take time and forensic work that could not be rushed.
Right now, 5 o'clock, the family of a local woman missing for a year is finally getting some answers. The Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office identified the remains discovered just a few weeks ago to be that of DeAndrea Ford. Thank you so much for joining us for KPRC2 News at 5. I'm Daniela Guzman. Keith Garvin is off today. We have team coverage on this developing story on air and online on click2houston.com. Let's start off with KPRC2's Rowan Balogan joining us live from Southwest Houston with a timeline of events and details on the suspect. Rowan.
Now, Daniela, the remains of Ford found in Dallas County, the same county where the man investigators say perpetrated this crime, killing the 21-year-old, also remains in jail.
It's an outcome family members of DeAndrea Ford didn't want to see. Her remains identified in Dallas nearly a year after she disappeared from this bar and grill in East Houston. Ford's uncle, Kevin Carrier, spoke with KPRC2's Rochelle Turner shortly after her disappearance.
Just at full disclosure, we were told by HPD that the person of interest, suspect, was detained out of town.
The person, this man, Yolande Washington. He was arrested in Dallas for a different case, but later charged in Ford's murder after investigators said they had evidence connecting him to her death. Court records show investigators saw surveillance video of the two getting into Washington's white van, but he was the only one seen leaving the vehicle. Dallas police tell KPRC2, quote, "This is being investigated as an unexplained death and the investigation is ongoing." However, Houston police tell me they're leading the investigation and waiting for Washington's extradition back to Houston.
On September 17th, 2024, exactly 1 year after DeAndrea had gone missing, DNA analysis confirmed what her family had been waiting to know and dreading to hear. The remains were those of DeAndrea Ford. The Carrier family had spent a year calling for justice while others moved at the pace the system moves at, which is to say, slowly, and with little apparent sense of what that slowness costs the people waiting on the other side of it. Kevin Carrier gave interviews. Bridget Carrier gave interviews. They said publicly what families in their position have been saying for years, that the response would have looked different if DeAndrea had looked different, that the delays would not have accumulated the way they did if the missing woman had fit a different profile, that the system had failed her and continued to fail her at almost every stage of the process. Yolande J. Washington was not someone law enforcement was encountering for the first time. He was 51 years old, a truck driver whose work took him across state lines on a regular basis, and a man whose criminal history included documented violence specifically against women in the sex industry. This was not incidental background information, it was a pattern. And patterns like his are exactly the kind of information that, had it been connected to his presence in Houston that night more quickly, might have changed the timeline of this investigation. He had chosen a white cargo van as his vehicle. He had parked it with the lights off. He had sat in that parking lot for an hour. These are not the behaviors of someone who stumbled into a situation. They are the behaviors of someone who had done something like this before or had thought carefully about how to do it. The prosecution's case against Washington rests on that behavioral evidence, combined with the DNA in the van, the cell tower data placing him at the location, and the physical remains found in Dallas County. Washington has maintained that he is not responsible for DeAndrea's death. The evidence recovered from his van, the forensic analysis of her remains, and the investigative record assembled over the course of more than a year tell a different story. And that story is headed to a courtroom in Harris County, Texas, where a jury will eventually have to decide what they believe. As of March 2026, Yolande J. Washington remains in custody in Dallas County, awaiting extradition to Harris County, Texas, where his trial will be heard in the 337th State District Court. No trial date has been confirmed publicly, no verdict has been reached. The case is ongoing. Harris County does not make its court files publicly accessible online. Case information requires in-person access through the district clerk at hcdistrictclerk.com. The case number has not been publicly released due to the ongoing status of the proceedings. What the trial will need to answer is not just whether Washington killed DeAndrea Ford, though the evidence already assembled makes that question feel like it has one direction. It will also need to answer a broader question that this case has been quietly asking since the night that the white van pulled out of the parking lot on the East Freeway. What does it take for the system to move quickly when a young black mother goes missing? What has to be found, confirmed, or publicized before the people with the authority to act on it decide that the urgency is real? DeAndrea's family has been asking that question for 2 years. They are still waiting for an answer that is equal to what they lost. In the time since DeAndrea's disappearance became public, her case has been taken up by domestic violence and femicide awareness organizations across the country, most prominently by the Black and Missing Foundation, which works specifically to ensure that missing Black women and girls receive the same level of attention and investigative urgency that cases involving other demographics routinely receive. DeAndrea was a young mother. She was a survivor of a violent crime. She was a witness in a murder case, which meant that her safety was directly tied to the outcome of a legal proceeding she did not choose to be part of. She was also a woman who, in order to support her child, was doing work that left her vulnerable in ways she could not fully protect herself from. None of those facts cancel each other out. All of them are part of who she was. Her grandmother raised her. Her son will grow up without her. And somewhere in a Dallas County courtroom to be, the full account of what happened inside a white van on a dark parking lot in Houston is still waiting to be told to a jury. May DeAndrea Lakeisha Ford rest in perfect peace. She had a son who needed her and a grandmother who had given everything to make sure she had a foundation to stand on. She showed up for her child the way Bridget Carrier had shown up for her, with consistency and love and a refusal to quit even when quitting would have been the easier thing to do. She survived a murder that took the life of someone else in the same vehicle and kept going. She deserved the protection that her role as a witness in that case should have afforded her. She deserved better from a system that had every reason to take her safety seriously and did not move fast enough to protect it. For the families of missing women who are living inside the silence that Bridget and Kevin Carrier know, the Black and Missing Foundation can be reached at blackandmissing.inc. They exist specifically because cases like DeAndrea's should never have to fight for attention, and because the families left behind should never have to do the work of investigators alone. Let me know what you think in the comments section below.